Hi. Actually, sorry about Thursday. It's on a day-to-day basis where we're constantly dealing with surprises and then like urgent reaction. How I got into this field is because I'm a member of the local fire department as a voluntary member, but that puts us into certain responsibilities. And so when COVID um, started and restarted, we simply didn't have enough people with the health department to deal with all the challenges which were coming up on a daily basis because it was growing exponentially. And what the health department had available as staff, and I would also say as software, wasn't wasn't um, wasn't ready for this situation. Um, so what we've been developing since last year was just a systematic solution to deal with the challenges, because what we're doing actually at the moment when we quarantine people or quarantine people, it's actually we're shooting um, massive quarantine explosions onto a group of people, of which we actually might find out that a percentage of them, a larger percentage of them, doesn't have any coronavirus. So it does have it has like a cluster effect on the surrounding of people, and this affects industry, this affects families, this affects children, education. It's quite a massive impact that it does affect. In the practical sense, when somebody gets corona, there's a lot of different uncalculatable um, health effects that the person has. Some people go through it without an issue, and some people where you wouldn't expect go through it without a problem. Let's say somebody who had cancer, you'd think like, okay, they should be affected. Someone who's, let's say, a very is an athletic kind of person, he's affected and can't continue his professional career. And you then find out some people are affected by corona like really rapidly. You talk to them like one day, and a few days later you find out they're in the hospital, and you're surprised how fast it went. Some people are affected by the consequences in the sense of um, because they can't get any visitors meet them, let's say in old age homes, where it's become very complicated to visit your relatives. So it's like a consequence of corona. So there's like a massive amount of different effects which are a challenge for dealing with, I would say, on a governmental basis, because they're the ones who create the administrative rules on which the health departments have to act. And these rules are changing from week to week, actually, or even from within every few weeks. There's changes happening, which make it also a challenge how to communicate the updated knowledge, how to deal with corona, how to communicate it efficiently and well into the administration of the country. Yes. So that's my special field, is actually dealing with companies which are affected by corona, in the sense it could be on um, multiple ways. Could be in the sense that one of the children of one of the employees has been sent into quarantine, and therefore the parents have to, or one parent has to stay at home to take care of the children. So that could be an effect. Let's say is one of the employees just has to miss going to work because can't do it and take care of the child. Could be an effect in the sense that um, one of the employees is corona positive and has contact with other employees, and thereby puts other employees into quarantine. And this is usually a situation when people are working close together, let's say in one office or one big big room office where you have many offices inside, or if you have people working in teams, let's say on certain projects in the production. So that's an effect where it can have quite some challenging consequences for companies to maintain their running business. So that's where I try to come up and kind of combine my possibilities in the sense of, on the one hand, the health effect, on the other hand, bringing in the legal possibilities. How can I find the ideal solution for each company to, on the one hand, improve their hygienic concept to prevent these kind of cluster quarantine effects, and on the other hand, how to help them to, when they have a situation, how can I create a controlled way of making sure that the people in quarantine actually should be in quarantine. Yes. So and so I'm doing two things. I'm communicating with the companies and helping them prepare plans and organizational things for the future. And on the other hand, when they get affected, I'm helping them deal with the situation so that they can just maintain their processes. And on the other hand, I can achieve my target of having a good control on the virus. So you're always trying to trying to find that that medium between fulfilling all the legal requirements and fulfilling all the health requirements, and also fulfilling the needs of the companies. And that's my day-to-day challenge. And it's crazy because it just, it happens by chance. Because we test on a daily basis, we test around 2,000 people. And so when we're testing, and it could be anybody, it could be the child, could be the mother, the father, any employee who gets tested, and we find out that they're positive, and then tracking which company is he working with, when's his last time he's been there, who has he been meeting with, who's been meeting how long and which way, and is there a possibility that there was a transfer of the virus under those circumstances. So you do a lot of like criminal investigation kind of work to find out like if there's any transfer of virus possible. Then you deal with, I would say mostly people, I would say 90%, 93% of the people are very truthful. And so that's not my big concern, but you do sometimes doubt the stories you get to hear. And but it's just part of the process. So I don't really take it. It's not my priority. My priority is just, taking the information I get, and usually the first information I get is the most truthful one, and then making out of that a strategy, and then talking from going from the employee, and then talking to the manager or the manager of the company, and communicating ways how they can strategically prevent cluster effects in future. And there I'm just trying to be the one who's helping them get through this challenging situation, because I know the background of the companies, because I was like working in companies, and also being a startup guy. I have that background experience, and I know how fast it could be really difficult for them to survive if they have to continue paying their employees. They're not getting the credit from the bank just to and pass through these challenging times. They might have delays in production, in supply, and there's all these delays have a huge impact on cash flow in companies. So that's something where I can understand them, and so I'm feeling for them and trying to help them on a day-to-day basis.
Kareem, I have a question, if that's okay to ask right now.
Sure,
It
please.
might be a very, very stupid question, but that's one thing that that's kind of bothering me or question in my head since the beginning. How can you track back where someone got infected? Because the virus in your blood doesn't come with a geotag.
Mm-hmm.
And how can it be that you can so accurately tell where people have been infected?
Actually, to be honest, the way you track back is the best way would be via a sophisticated IT system, yeah, because you can recognize from the contact people had, yeah, you can recognize who's been a contact person to someone who was positive, right? And then from there you can track who the people who were contact people, which one of them became positive, and then you can track like who did they get positive. So it's more from this contact people list. So a sophisticated software would really be great for doing all this tracking. That's actually what deep machine learning and like that could do in a situation like this would be, perfect. To just run through all the contact person bases and recognize the clusters instead of it being human based, recognizing things by chance. On a general basis, there's just a handful of possibilities where um, people get the virus, and that's like just from experience, that's mainly having breakfast or lunch or supper together for a time span of a few hours, or chilling together in a circle, like in rooms, or working in the same office with someone else. And wait, let me see. Or being in a hospital. That's a quite common possibility to get the virus. You go in without it and you come out with the virus. Being in an old age home, where you have people living close together. That's usually when people have a lot of contact. Let's say healthcare providers. They're quite commonly also the people who are transferring viruses from person to person, because they treat a lot of people. So that's why we're that quite I mean, that's just my experience on top with just following up on it. It's the challenge with the virus is that you don't really recognize it immediately when you get it, and even in tests you don't recognize it. So that transfer time is possible to transfer it while it's not even recognizable in a PCR test or a rapid.
And also, I think only
Test.
50% really turned keeping the virus into having COVID, right?
Excuse me?
Only 50% convert from having the virus to having corona, right?
Actually, if you were to PCR test all of us, and you were to have machines testing us with like CTs up to 50 or 60 or like that, cycles like testing us on virus, I would probably find out that every one of us has the virus somehow, in small amounts, very small amounts, right? So there's this threshold. It's like CT is cycle threshold. So basically, when you take specimen from us, let's say from I don't know, from the nasal area or from the throat area, and you run it in cycles to see if there's any virus there. And one cycle is like you heat it up and then you test it. You heat it up, be again without and test it. That would be 2 cycles. And with every heating up, you are increasing the amount of virus available. So if you run through, let's say 50, 60, 70 cycles, you'll probably find everyone in some way has a small amount of this virus available. Yeah, you become contagious. That's how. I mean, it's not through the line like this, but this is just a number set. You become contagious when you have a CT lower than 30. So that's when you're considered contagious for other people. The challenge with the virus is that when you initially get the virus and you just got it, right? You could have a CT which is above 30, and then the virus grows within your system, and then you get a CT value which is below 30, goes down to 15, 22 or something like that. And then when you end your cycle of the virus, it might go back up to, 35, 37. It might stay there for a while, right? Until, and might stay there for a few months even, until it leaves your system. It depends on the person. It's quite a question. Like you don't know why some people have it like longer, right? They might 2 months later, they might be tested positive. And continuously you're testing them positive. You don't know why this person has the virus, and even his CT value is above 30, so he's not contagious for others. But why is he having a longer like recognizability of this virus, and another person, like he goes in and goes out, right? And it's really fast. And that's something I think, at least from our side, we don't recognize it. Where's the what are the causes and effects of each person? But I think like a smart AI system which could recognize all the features of the people who have the virus would be quite finding out those patterns which we possibly wouldn't even think of, right? If you could bring in the health database and you could bring in the health database of the people, and combine them with the special aspects of they have, like in social aspect, and maybe the living patterns. If you could do that, you would actually be able to recognize a lot of patterns, which would help us maybe come up with some alternative strategies to deal with it.
Nicole, you had a question.
Yeah, I wanted to know how you do it, that you contact the people and you call the people, or that you can that where the virus or who is infected from this person who has COVID.
We get any person who gets COVID, he gives us a list of their contacts, and we talk to them on the phone on a daily basis. We talk to them, we write emails back and forth, we send letters by mail, depending on the age groups. Some age groups who don't. It's quite interesting though that a lot of people who are born in the 40s have emails, yeah? So it's quite advanced. And you find people who are born in the 60s don't have email addresses. So I'm saying you can't stereotype this, but we can actually do, I would say 98% of our communication we can do by phone and by email. And people who are born in the 40s actually have mobile phones, and a lot of people born in the 60s don't have them. So it's quite funny to disprove one's own stereotypes in this daily contact. Yeah, so we talk to them on the phone and email. Yeah. That would be another very interesting thing, if bringing in databases from Facebook. That would be quite interesting. Maybe there's some patterns one can recognize there just as well.
How useful and supportive are the Corona apps actually in real?
Yeah, not. I mean, I don't know.
I think this is an answer.
Yeah, I mean, you get people calling up and they say, well, Corona app says I had 3 contacts, and could be anything from I just walked by somebody in the store, right? But just walk by somebody in the store isn't really the indicator for transferring the virus. I don't really, like, from my observation, I don't think walking by somebody transfers the virus. It's usually sitting together and chatting for a longer time, for 1 hour like that, 2-3 hours, right? It's usually people who sit at the table and they're just eating for 3 hours together, 2 hours laughing and talking, right? And we're talking about aerosols leaving from your body out, and then the other person inhaling them. So if you want to have a big amount of concentration inhaled, you have to only think about those circumstances in which a concentration is allowed in the air. So that's not happening in the store. Usually stores have ventilation systems, they have HEPA filtration systems, so they could say within a time span of 25 minutes, the complete air in the store is circulated and changed. Yeah. So it's usually happening in small rooms. It's happening in a room where you're sitting in a circle and the people are in the middle, like the breakfast, lunch, and supper, kind of meetings. It's happening in an office space where people are sitting opposite to each other, or in a room which doesn't have ventilation systems. That's circumstances where it's happening. It could happen, let's say, if you have like ventilation systems without filtrations. Yeah, that you could envision a mass spread, but I've never encountered something like that happening.
Marcus, you wanted to ask something, I think.
Well, Kareem, I'm really interested because, as I understand it, you are a normal, intelligent, regular guy involved in a bit of tech, a lot of startups, and with a big wide network. And then suddenly you're pivoted into this crazy situation where we have a lot of information around the place, not in one place. And we're almost, it seems to me that the situation which you're describing, it's actually, I've got 3 questions. I need a little bit of help in trying to strategize them. First one, how did you pivot from, I'm guessing if we had this conversation 2 years ago about the transmission of contagion, you'd probably say, hey, look, I'll go talk to a doctor. And now you are talking about CT levels, you're talking about all sorts of stuff and transmission of coronavirus. First of all, how did that happen? Then my second question is, I suppose, related to the issue which we have in the UK right now, and I know Australia's having, or actually everybody's probably having, is that if we had enough information, we could track this. But a lot of people are saying, well, this is like invasion of my privacy. I'm not going to tell you everything which I do. I don't want to have all this stuff known. And in our country, people don't want to disclose anything in case they get told to quarantine.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's the very people who you do want to know are the ones who are nervous about disclosing anything or complying with anything. And then I suppose my final is just your observation on the difference in approach of the startup communities and the investment communities and the financial communities with your experience when it interfaces into the health communities. So I've got sort of three. One is how you pivoted and actually how that happened. Two is, I suppose, around personal freedom and invasion of privacy over something which seems to be life critical rather than, oh, I don't want to get some mailings from people I don't want to buy stuff from. And then the third one is just your take on the difference between the startup communities from which you came and the health community which you're now in. So it's three questions, very poorly structured, very poorly worded. Apologies, but I hope that the general thrust is getting over.
Just give me the second one again.
I've forgotten it. No, the second one is on invasion of privacy.
Okay. All right.
In order to be able to track. So
Exactly.
the first one is personal. How do you pivoted?
Yeah.
The second one is about invasion of privacy so that we get the information which you were so talking about track and trace and so on. And the third one is your experience of the startup go-getting community which you came from.
Yeah.
And now the sort of interface with health which you're in.
Okay.
There,
So basically how I pivoted was very, very simple. You know, being I'm actually just a voluntary firefighter, right? So when I'm at work and we have some emergency situation, the beeper goes off and you go, you rush off to deal with the situation, the fire situation, or it could be any kind of emergency situation. So and through that, what happened? It's something called, on a legal term, Amtshilfe, right? So what if you have a catastrophe or if you have some kind of situation, the government can request administrative help from all kind of administrative arms. So that could be from the finance ministry, could be from the building and what would you call it? Building construction ministry, or or departments. It's not ministry, more departments, because in an administrative system on federal and on state level and district level, you have all these branches of administration. So in the fire department, police, and they're considered an extended part of this administration. The voluntary firefighter, he's actually he signs an agreement of non-disclosure to for a certain kind of topics, which is an agreement federal or an agreement with the government. Yeah, even though he's not being paid, right? So that's how I pivoted in there. Was simply we were requested to help, and that's why I got into this. Yeah. So and learning this stuff is, anyway, like being a startup guy, I have my daily learning session. So whenever I come up with something I don't understand and I don't know, I'm going to research it, listen to lectures, and do that on a daily basis. It's like, whatever, it must be at least 200 minutes a week. That's my standard minimum, right? So then invasion of privacy, it's a good topic, and it's probably going to be dependent on region to region, and how's the trust of the people in this topic. People, if people, I personally believe it's related to, do people take it serious? So did somebody have someone with COVID within their own circle of experience? They take it, they have a different way of dealing with it than somebody who didn't have any experience at all, right? So somebody who lost, let's say, an aunt, an uncle, they just going to see the situation completely different. So I think that's that aspect of being able to recognize if it's serious and how serious it is has an effect on how how honest you are with dealing with this personal information, right? And then a second aspect, if you see that the activities done by your by the administration, which would be usually the health departments who are dealing with it, if you see that they are efficient and they're actually showing results, right? If you think they make sense, I think people in the large majority are willing to support and help fighting this virus. If they see things which don't make sense, which aren't congruent, then I think people lose trust, and with losing trust, they are also not going to contribute with providing their private information, which is necessary actually to be able to track the virus. So I think it's really it's the test of the press department. How is their communication out to the people, to the companies, to all social levels, and then how is the work being done in the health department, which will decisively affect on how people are going to respond in their contribution. Regarding the startup topic is, I mean, coming from startup and business industrial background, it's completely different if a health department, how they work and what they have available. And it's if you had if it was company based, you would say, here's a virus and I'm going to come up with strategies to attack and and win, right? On an administrative level, it's usually a reactionary level, right? So when you have resources available as a company, you're going to say, hey, we're just going to continue fighting, let's whatever, take the Alibaba story or whatever, the Tesla story, where they're like, hey, it doesn't matter if we're doing good, we're still going to continue doing whatever, 12, 13 hours a day or whatever until we win, because if we slack now, it might come back, right? And we have to just improve and upgrade our systems to get away from the reactionary level to come into the level where we have automated systems where we can attack, kind of call it attack, right? We could recognize the clusters where they're happening, communicate to the population, hey, let's not do this, let's do this, let's reorganize our breakfast times, keep them at 45 minutes, for example. If you're having breakfast, keep a distance of 2 meters, have a great breakfast together, talk and like that, keep the windows open, right? Silly stuff like that, but be in communication and giving the people the advice that you need to know to prevent certain kind of transfer situations, right? I mean, there's actually, I mean, we can't say there's not a lot of information available. There's just, I would say there's a lot of information available on the virus. It's just not organized and digested well. And that's something where, I mean, we could take the information from February and March. There's been plans ongoing in China how to deal with the virus, and one could take and digest that information and all the information that we get in March, April, May, in each country, and it's just create more advanced systems how to deal with it. And I think that's where that's where I would say the startup community would come up with faster reaction and faster advancement of solutions than a non-startup community. Yeah.
So you think those are great answers. So do you think the startup community should be more involved in this entire exercise globally of dealing with this pandemic?
It would be great. And the thing though is, where I mean it. I'll turn it around like this. All right. The executive branch dealing with it is the health department. The health department is a part of the administration. The administration gets their uh, rules of action. They get them from the executive executive, I guess, or what do you call it? Legislature, executive, and judiciary, right? They get it from the executive, which is the government, right? And the government is usually reactionary in their way of behavior, unless they're proactive, right? And the parliament usually needs a lot of time to make laws because there's a lot of discussions back and forth. So how do you get a startup community to introduce into this rather slow working system? How do you get them to introduce fast reactionary plans? I think the Corona app was like one of those, right? But it's the developments taking place in the Corona app could be faster and taking more advantage of a lot more info and topics, and but there's much more in the whole dealing of this situation than the Corona app. Like, you have to go through what is the software being used by the government in dealing with it and recognizing patterns, and is it available throughout the country or throughout Europe, or is it just available on a regional level? Is every region using a different software, right? And what does that software give as added value other than just logging individuals and their personal data? I mean, does it benefit from other individuals? Does it do anything for you? And that, I think that's it's a long way, and it takes a long time with the way how things are right now. Like if it was like a private company which was managing this situation, I would say there would be a much faster continuous upgrade of their systems, and that's not the way it's going at the moment. So Neil.
Yeah, I had a question. It's around the, if I understand correctly, in Germany, the regions have a lot of autonomy, and certainly more so than, say, in the UK. Is the approach now, the region where you are, is it exactly the same in all the other regions? In other words, there's a federal mandate that's come down, or do you have quite a lot of flexibility within the regions to approach coronavirus? And the strategies that you and your region are taking, are they similar? And if so, if they're different, do you sort of share experiences and learn from each other?
Yes and no, right? So in our state, we have the same rules and regulations. The interpretation of these rules and regulations varies based upon what we are communicated by the RKI, which is Robert Koch Institute, what we are communicated as interpretation from the state government, then what regulations are available on the federal government, and what our health department interprets of all of this, and then what the individual might interpret on their level, wherever he has or she has flexibility. So there is not the system where you could say each health department is going to deal with the situation with, let's say, if you took one typical person I give you one example. One person is being treated by 15 health departments. You're probably going to have maybe three different patterns how that person is treated. Yeah. And it might, if you would go into a different state, you'd just have, for each state, multiply that. So 16 states in Germany, and make it times 3. So you're going to have 16 times 3, right? So something like that. Yeah. And it changes from topic to topic. If somebody's the entry quarantine into the country, how that is dealt with, and how is the quarantine situation and the length of the quarantine situation, and when can the person exit quarantine, that would change also, and from department to department. Or is this person considered a contact person, first degree or not? That would change. Those are like the specific topics which are which have a range of interpretation.
But what you're doing, your specific role, particularly dealing with companies, it's something similar is happening across Germany, across all of the states.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that's for sure. That's happening to across the country. Some are going to be more stringent, and some are going to be more relaxed. And I'm pretty sure my basic assumption is going to be, and I don't know if I didn't check up on it, but I would say those states which are or those regions which are in a worse financial situation, they're going to be more relaxed. And those regions which are in a better financial situation are going to be more stringent with rules, because we all know the long-term effects of are something that we also have to keep in mind.
Right, it's really interesting. I mean, I've not heard, I don't know, Marcus, whether you have, I've not heard of any organization or part of organizations dealing specifically with companies in the way that you're approaching companies, almost on a sort of one-to-one level and very personal level. Maybe it's happening, but I haven't seen it or heard it or come across it.
Niall, I mean, this is quite interesting, because if Germany's got 16 states, the equivalent in the UK, we have, I suppose, 3.5 states. We have basically England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. But we have 343 local authorities who consider themselves. So basically, we've lost that. So we have the central government, that's one, based in Westminster. That's where the MPs are, 600 MPs. And then the next stage down is these 3.5 states they have their own state parliaments, except for England, who doesn't. And then, which is the biggest one. So the other states consider that England is the UK. And then we have 343. And it sounds to me, quite obviously, is that in terms of getting dissemination through in a local way, the German 16 states enables more flexibility to happen faster. Because otherwise you get 343 stupid bullshit things going on, and then the 3.5 on the top go, this is rubbish. And then the one at the top says ridiculous, which is I'm sorry. I've just realized. So Niall, I think I'm on the level that maybe because Bavaria is a powerful state in itself, as opposed to a sub-state in England under the 340, they have nobody gives a shit what they say. And I think that's probably the problem.
Yeah.
How interesting. Fascinating.
It is.
Fascinating.
And maybe
sorry,
just,
Niall,
that was it. I mean, that was my question And you know, I think it is a fascinating difference. You know, similar in many ways, but some subtle differences that have big impacts, I think, in these sort of crises where you have to have that rapid communication and consistency based on facts rather than opinions. And maybe just one other thing to share. Mark, I don't know, have you come across this Zoe study, Marcus? Are you part of that?
No.
The Zoe? It's you talk about AI, and I mean, the UK has done an awful lot badly in the last 12 months. But and it's nothing to do with the government, but King's College, a very reputed university in London.
Oh yeah.
One of their professors and his team have come up with this study called Zoe, and it's based on AI. And you know, for the last year, 10 months, me and 4.5 million other people in the UK are filling this in every day. And it basically, it's this. So report today, me, and I'll try and show you. It first of all asks if can you see that? It asks if you've had a test. So I've had 2 tests through this study, actually. And then you update the test and you say, yes, the list's correct. Have I had a vaccine? No. And then it asks, how do you feel physically well or not? And if I do, so I click yes. But if I say no, then it takes me through a whole series of questions way beyond the normal classical symptoms about how I'm feeling. And they add and change that list. And then that AI will interpret that, feed it into the government. And they're now using this as a major source of not just information on the virus, but also tracking the infection rates, because it's more predictive. And you know, I've been asked to have tests a few times based on my responses, which aren't around the classic symptoms. You know, maybe because I just felt a bit tired, or you know, the combination of factors that they think that could well be coronavirus. So I don't know whether that's similar in other countries, but that's the one thing that I've seen in the UK that they've done very well, but it wasn't governmental.
No?
And I'm on it, but I didn't realize it was Zoe.
Oh, right. Okay. Right. Yes. And also you get lots of data from it. So if you participate, then you do get more detailed data of infection rates in different regions and so on. So.
Now you don't have that detailed information available on the public websites, updated on a daily basis or weekly basis?
We have, I think what's available there you can probably find. It's not, I mean, I never look for it because I have it on on the app. You know, of course we have national data updated, and I think it's regional as well.
We do, Niall, but the fixation in the UK is number of incidents per 100,000 in the population. And of course that can skew because the population, the sample size might be tiny. So if you have a small area of say 1,000 people, then if one person has a symptom, then that becomes 1,000 in 100,000, you know, it becomes, because everything is extrapolated up to numbers per 100,000. If you start off with just 20 people, you know, then one of them becomes a huge number per 100,000. And so a lot of the data which we are presenting, because we're trying to make it simple for people to understand, so number of incidents per 100,000, we are at the mercy of tiny samples. So the more granularity you get, the more ridiculous it is to extrapolate it up into numbers per 100,000. And so we have swings all over the place. And I think that is potentially getting people to think this is crazy.
I'm chiming in. In the meantime, Johan has joined us. Johan is patent examiner for the European Union. He is in Egypt right now on his very last day. He's flying back to The Hague, I think, today. Johan, you have a question.
Hi, Nikki. Thanks so much. Yes, I'm in Egypt actually for a week. Overall, I'm also extremely interested in everything around COVID because, you know, previously I used to work for the NIH in Washington, D.C. So Dr. Fauci was actually one of my N+2 directors. It's not necessarily a question I have, and I don't know how much, Kareem, you kind of deal with this or are considering it, but there's something I saw in Egypt which completely shocked me. And this is the institutionalized fraud about the PCR testing. So what is happening in Egypt? You go on the streets and people stop you. Hey, do you want a test? And they give you the paper, the template. Okay, just give me your data. We can make you the certificate for a negative test. And it is at such a level that literally people now, previously I was here like 2 years ago, they used to stop you for, I don't know, buying their products. Now they stop you for getting the test, I have the best, template. I have the best, I don't know. So, and what I also realized is that this can be actually the biggest problem for COVID. This kind of huge corruption that is growing around the testing and certificates. And, I also feel very bad because I see more and more of my friends who are exchanging, the test templates in between them and just filling in the data with Photoshop. What is your take on this matter? Wow. How can we control or stop this? Because in my view, this is going to be a huge source of infections very soon.
I know that the Robert Koch Institute, they have a published list, number one, of the tests from which companies they accepted, from which countries they accepted. I think I totally can imagine that, because of that's probably happening all over the place, especially people who want to travel, or is there some kind of official consequence connected with the PCR test, and that's going to happen anywhere, and it's very easy to do it, right? I'm pretty sure it's going to be less here in Europe, because you have all those testing stations, but I was also in Indonesia and Egypt and like that. And I mean, you could probably buy them just along with those fake Adidas shoes, right?
Exactly.
Right. So I would say that's a really great contribution, and I think, Johan, maybe there's like a possibility to make a database where you have like official. And I'll give you another example, which runs kind of parallel to this and how it's been solved. If you take, for example, the whole masks, right? Masks have a CE certificate, they have an SGS or a TÜV or DECRA, or whatever certification body, they get a certificate number. And now you've got all these masks being produced, and then they're called KN95, FFP2, they're called N95. And people say, oh, it says FFP2, it says KN95, it must be according to the norms which are made for this mask. It's an N95, or it must be a good mask, right? And specifically, the mask, if you produce it with 3 same layers, like the outside and the inside layer are the same, you're talking about 1/100th of the price in production cost than if you were to actually have those expensive filtration layers inside the mask. So there's been a lot of fraud taking place there, and people who buy masks actually don't know that they need to have a mask which has an official recognized certification body that has done it. Mask producing companies have actually been interchanging those certificates and just manufacturing those masks and selling them using someone else's certificate and just, photoshopping it with their own name inside. Yeah, that's standard procedure since last year. The only way.
What's shocking me is that I see in my friend circle, even doctors, like a dentist, for example, or engineers who say, I'm gonna just fill in a template from a friend, you know, because it's just too expensive to do it. I mean, in the Netherlands, to do a PCR with a certificate is 150 euros. But, you know, I really don't understand how people who have, you know, this kind of level of understanding of the situation get to this mindset that, you know, let's fake the system. Let's try to kind of, you know, play around and just exchange among ourselves these templates, fill in with Photoshop or Adobe Acrobat Reader, and just travel. In my view, also at airports, there must be some sort of a verification system, you know, not just that at the airport, you know, they check your test, but at least sometimes they call the lab. Did you really do this test? Because on every test, there's a number. And, you know, in this case, there should be huge fines, in my view.
I mean, you could do it easily with a QR code, right? Each test has a QR code. You have to scan it, and then you can do the traveling, right? And it's doable. It's you know, you can organize that just like you scan your passport. I can't travel into a country unless when it's scanned, it's seeing Kareem, not Heinz or like that. So that's
Sounds like a business model. 20 cents for certification every PSR test.
Yeah, I mean they're expensive, the PCR tests. Luckily here in Germany, they're well, depends. In my state, it's being paid by the government. But I mean, I can tell you about individuals themselves. They must have done 10 PCR tests, and so you're talking about 1,500 euros just for one person. And if you calculate that on a big amount, that's it gets quite expensive. And so I can imagine that in many developing countries, or in many countries, people are going to say, hey, I can't afford it. It's as easy as that. Yeah.
Kareem, I'm also a bit marshal of the time, and we've hit the top of the hour, and I don't want to abuse your generosity over capacity. That was insanely informative and interesting. Thank you so much. I think there is a strong value in this session, and the wisdom you've shared and the thoughts. I really appreciate. I'm always connecting everyone, so the speakers we meet with the people in the room. Feel free to take it from there and connect and stay in touch. I just wanted to say thank you one more time. That was I feel like we could turn this into a matinee and talk until noon, but this is not how it's supposed to be. It's just a hot topic, of course, of interest for all of us. Kudos to your work. Stay strong. We need you.
It was great with everybody. Thank you. I mean, you got any questions, just write me, contact me.
Thank you, Kareem. That was fantastically insightful.
Yeah. And I'm happy, actually. I'm learning things I didn't know. So thank you for everybody's contribution. Yeah. Marcos, Neil, Nicole, Nikki, thank you, everybody.
And Johan for coming up with the fraud. Amazing. I've
Yes.
just been looking it up. My goodness.
Informal economy is hitting in. Kareem, have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
Bye, thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
And thank you, Nikki, for putting this together. I think it's been superb.
Here.
And thanks, Johan, for joining us. That was a wonderful observation.
Yeah, I mean, what I saw here is mind blowing. Is shocking. You like is incredible. And you know what happened? I confronted one of these guys who was desperately trying to sell me this fake test. Like, do you think this is normal? Do you think this is right what you're doing? And the guy said he has no money to pay gas for his car, and he's doing it out of desperation. So the level of poverty, because this is a touristic region, of course there are no tourists, reached such a level that let's say out of 100%, 0.001%, I understand them. I can empathize that they are really in a situation which is very bad.
Mm.
But then, this is not the solution. So, but, I don't know what, and the government doesn't help these people, taxi drivers who had to change their job and transform into doing these kind of illegal things because there are no tourists who take the taxi. So what's happening now, you're walking on a street in Hurghada, for example, and every taxi stops next to you, please take a ride with me because I need to feed my children. It's insane. And I'm really like shocked by what I've seen here. So that's really sad, actually. And this is just going to get worse because, we are not out of this COVID. So, that's what I can say for now.
Johan, did you find out what the street price is for a fake COVID test?
Yes, so in Hurghada, the real test, so there is only one real test location, a lab, is $30. Now you can get the fake one for $10 on the street. So it's 1/3 of the price.
Highly profitable for the informal economy.
Yeah, and
They usually
really do it.
5 ravens for the same amount.
And what is shocking me is that it's, as I said, institutionalized because the police, can very easily track these people, right? I mean, let's be honest, they know that they are doing this.
Yeah.
So that's a bit what really shocked me. And, I guess this is also in other countries in the region. This is not just Egypt. Jordan, all these countries where the main source of income is tourism these people had to do something to survive, right?
Mm.
So it's really bad for Europe because, as I said, at the airports, nobody checks the validity of tests, like really nobody. They just look at your screen, negative, okay, you can go. But I never had anyone, calling the lab, checking the QR code, nothing.
Well, thanks for that, Johan. That makes me feel much better. Oh, sorry, Nicole.
Yeah, that's the reason why we have the South African virus in Tyrol.
Exactly.
And everybody's asking, oh, poor people. Oh no, we have now the South African, and it's but if you can travel everywhere and there is no consequence, we won't change our patterns. And it's, I think what makes me so angry is that there is no common solution worldwide that you say, okay, with this test, with this QR code, you can pass by an airport.
So this is a huge issue, and what Kareem said is the same with the Corona apps. Each country has their own application.
Yeah.
There's no interoperability. So why don't we have in the whole European Union a unique test template with a unique QR code and a unique database with a list of labs which are, certified? And, the EU can, collaborate with these governments in Egypt. I mean, I would suppose that not everybody is corrupt, that, which are really those test locations in Egypt, for example, which provide reliable tests. So it's not that difficult, in my view, there are just small steps everybody could make to make this a bit more safe for everybody. And then, of course, we would have maybe less of these new variants from Brazil, South Africa. I now heard something about the Mexican one. And maybe we would get, sooner out of this. But I don't feel that people are really considering this issue of the corruption undermining all these efforts that is now growing in many countries.
Yeah, but Johan, I mean, just look at so the UK has left the EU, but the UK hasn't left Europe, because we haven't paddled the islands away. And just look at this bullshit which has been going on between you know, AstraZeneca and Novartis and all the rest of it, and looking at the squabbles which are taking place between countries within the EU.
Yes.
And now what we're talking about is, we're talking about, for the first time, we have something which is global. You know, it affects every single human being. And if ever there's a time to say, put all the political bullshit to one side, this is way more important than this.
Yes, and that's why recently I posted that, in my view, we learned nothing from COVID. The same old patterns, you know, putting in front political interests, economical interests is just there. You know, we cannot, as a human civilization, we cannot get out of this pattern of thinking, right?
I mean, I'm not a big fan of vaccinations in general, but I'm not anti-vaccinations. But when I heard that Moderna makes 90 million today and will make 60 billion with the revenue of the vaccines, I think everything is said about how much you can trust the process.